Anyway, Esther 6 today. Last week we were in Esther chapter 5. In Esther chapter 5 we have this famous encounter between Esther and the king. And we know that Esther is going uninvited, which is a dangerous thing. Back in chapter 4 you had this back and forth between Mordecai, her cousin, and Esther, where Mordecai is really conveying to her the seriousness of the situation. This decree has gone out for the annihilation of all the Jews in the empire in a matter of months. And he says to Esther, you've probably been put where you are for such a time as this. And she says, don't you realize the death penalty for going to the king uninvited? And he says, if you don't go, you're going to die anyway. And the Lord will provide. Well, he doesn't say the Lord will provide. We're inferring that. Deliverance will come from someplace else. That's as close as we get to a faith confession in Esther, chapter 4, where Mordecai indicates you are where you are because of divine providence. And if you don't act, deliverance will come some other way. That's as close as we get to an expression of faith. Esther says, okay, then have all the Jews fast for me. Esther and her maids, presumably not all Jewish, are also fasting. And so you have this implied prayer, intercession, humbling themselves for the Lord, although again, that's not explicitly stated, and they're readying themselves for Esther's encounter. So last week was Esther's encounter with the king, and she plays it off masterfully. She dresses in her beautiful royal robe. She literally puts on royalty, but inwardly we know she's weak from fasting for 3 days. And yet we also know biblically that fasting is a position of strength. When we are weak, the Lord is strong in us. That's just kind of a biblical theme that comes up again and again. And so Esther and her people and her maids have been fasting. So inwardly she is weak, but outwardly she's adorned with this royal garb. And yet we know she's in a strong position because she and her people have been fasting and implied praying. And she plays it well because she stays in the inner court outside of the king's hall. And before she actually enters the king's hall, he sees her. She is deliberately positioned where he will see her. And he actually kind of calls her in. So kind of diffuses some of the tension here. And he extends the gold scepter, which means the guys with axes can't chop her head off, And so they kind of, settle down. And she goes and goes before him. And he immediately knows something is up or she wouldn't have taken this risk. What's the matter? What is the issue here? And she says, come to a banquet I have prepared, you and Haman. She manages to invite the king and Haman without offending the king that Haman will be present. And while extremely honoring Haman, he gets to have a private banquet with the king and the queen. Nobody gets that. Even though Haman is right-hand man of the king, that's an exclusive privilege. So she has managed to butter up Haman and have Haman off guard and have Haman present for this conversation, which means there can't be any triangulating afterward. So he is not going to at all be suspecting what's coming. Remember, Haman has been responsible for this decree to annihilate Esther's people, and the king has not connected the dots that the people he's eliminating are Esther's people. But Haman is totally buttered up by this. We saw that in part of last week's chapter. And the king says, what do you want, Esther? And what's interesting here is the king ended up doing Esther's word. Let's go to the banquet immediately, in accordance to the word of Esther. And so it's Esther's word being carried out here. And yet she keeps on framing it as, if I found favor in the eyes of the king, if it pleases the king, then come to another banquet, and I will do your word, meaning I'll give you my request. So she has flipped it around that it's like what he wants, but actually she's going to end up getting what she has asked for. If it pleases you to grant my request, then come to my second banquet. That was the setup from last week. Questions or comments about that? So that was Esther's first encounter, and she wants a second banquet. And we wonder, why not ask right now? Things are going really well, Esther. Don't drag this out another day. And so she invites for a second banquet, but the second banquet, his arrival will be a declaration of intent to give what she is asking. So she, again, has him in her court. Let's read again, since we did this kind of quickly last week. We'll read again Esther 5, 9 through 14, because we're not moving too fast here at Wednesday morning Bible study. Esther 5, verses 9 through 14. Sandy has that. Thank you.
Even up to half the kingdom that Jew Mordecai, sitting at the king's gate.
One more verse, please.
His wife, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up.
Okay, thank you. So Haman goes out that day after banquet number 1, and Haman is on top of the world. As somebody said last week, it's the song, "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way." And he is, except for one way, it seems. He goes out happy and in high spirits. This is the same language used when the king and his men were drunk in chapter 1. High spirits in Esther means intoxicated. So he's happy and drunk, and he's had this meal with the queen and the king. And he goes out and he sees Mordecai at the king's gate. Again, at the king's gate is probably an expression for more than just a gatekeeper, probably an expression for an official who worked at that part of the palace compound by the gate. But he sees Mordecai, and when Mordecai sees Haman, what does Mordecai not do? Yeah, I won't rise, I won't give you honor. Doesn't even fear, doesn't even show any acknowledgement of this guy walking by. So remember the problem, if it's really a problem in chapter 3, for whatever reason, whether it's ethnic reasons or theological reasons or personal reasons or some combo of those, Mordecai will not bow down and pay honor, 2 verbs, to Haman, and that's what irks Haman. And now we have here, he won't rise or show him reverence. And so once again, Haman is filled with rage. Anytime somebody in Esther is filled with rage, it's bad news. Yes, Liz?
My translation says, he wasn't standing up or trembling nervously before him.
Right, right.
I don't know what the actual...
No fear and trembling would be the expression.
My point is, this guy, he wants people to, be scared of him,
Yeah.
that doesn't point to a good...
Yes, yes, yeah. Haman wants people to be in fear of him. Yes, he does in fact want that. And he, from Mordecai, is not getting that. Even though actually he is the one who has been responsible for his decree to have Mordecai and his people eliminated. Mordecai is not living in fear of him, and this bothers this bothers Haman deeply. He's very angry about this. I think just now of the passage from Isaiah, who are you that you fear mortal men? That's the question Isaiah asks of God's people. And Mordecai's like, I'm not going to fear mortal men. But Haman wants that fear. Right, right. Yeah, Mordecai's a big faith guy, and Esther has already put her plan in motion. Now, Mordecai does not yet know how that has gone. He doesn't know how the banquet has gone, but he sees Haman coming out here in apparently a highly spirited, pun intended, condition, and he is not happy that Mordecai is not giving him any kind of fear or trembling whatsoever.
Is Haman number 2?
He is number 2 now, that's right. If you go back to chapter 3, let's go ahead and go there since Norm asked. At chapter 3, remember, the contrast was jarring for us. The last thing we read in chapter 2, the end of chapter 2, was that Mordecai, through Esther, tipped off the king of a conspiracy to assassinate the king, and Mordecai was recorded as the one who was responsible for that information, but nothing was done to honor Mordecai. And then the beginning of chapter 3, instead of Mordecai being honored, we have this. So chapter 3, 1 and 2. Who would like that? Norm has it.
After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him, giving him a seat of honor or higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor.
Now, we know something about the way the king's decrees come about. We know the king doesn't write his own decrees. We know the king gets persuaded, convinced, manipulated into all the decisions of consequence he makes. He's not his own man. He is a puppet of his administration all the way on through here. So when it says the king had commanded that all the royal officials at the king's gate pay honor to Haman and bow down, we read Haman connived something here. We're just assuming that. But we know for sure that Xerxes promoted Haman to be his right-hand man, and we don't know why. So the inexplicable lack of honor toward Mordecai goes right along with the inexplicable honoring of Haman. And the only thing we know is that Haman is the descendant of Agag. He's an Amalekite. And we know that Mordecai is from the tribe of Saul. He's an Israelite. And we know the history between the Israelites and the Amalekites is not good. The history between Saul and Agag is not good. And so this multi-generational feud is going to come to bear again in this relationship. And the expectation by decree of the king is that Haman receives, as right-hand man, he's right there, he's second in command, as right-hand man of the king, he's supposed to get bowing down and homage from all the others at the king's gate. And Mordecai is the only one at the king's gate who says, I won't bow down or pay him honor. And now here we have again, after this happy, wonderful banquet, Haman has been honored above all people by being invited into the presence of the king and the queen for a private banquet, and his life is as good as it can get, and he goes outside, and there is that Jew Mordecai again, neither fearing nor trembling at his presence, and Haman is ticked off.
Having been reading about the killing of President Kennedy, and there's a convoluted thing about that, I wonder if these guards had a conspiracy from Haman
Yeah,
to do
that,
which would have elevated him to the
right.
king.
That's one of the speculations of the scholars that Norm has named here. And Norm is thinking conspiracy because he's reading a book about Kennedy's assassination right now. But one of the reasons that some have speculated that Mordecai wouldn't bow down to Haman is that Mordecai knew for some reason that Haman was of the same stock as Bigthan and Teresh, the guys who were plotting against the king, and maybe even complicit with them. And maybe their attempt on the king was connected to Haman's own ambitions. We can't prove that, of course. This is one of those many things in Esther where we don't know the motives, we simply speculate. But certainly we get the idea that Haman is in it for Haman, and Haman would be happy to receive as much power, honor, wealth, prestige as the king or anyone would be willing to give him. And so we don't know for sure. But that may be going on. Question or comment? Yes.
But you don't really see any of the other nobles, like they're questioning Mordecai, like why won't you bow down? But it's not like, I mean, if Haman hadn't been so enraged, could he have just like taken Mordecai and Mordecai would have gotten punished for not following the law? Or, but then he turns into this like empire-wide situation here. But it seems like Mordecai, if he breaks the law, it
Right.
doesn't seem to really care except Haman.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so there's several layers here. Liz is saying this reminds her of, and it's supposed to remind us of Daniel. Remember when Daniel, as a Jew, being promoted as highly as he is in the king's court in his day, and the other non-Jewish officials are jealous of Daniel and are therefore trying to set him up and get him caught on the high crime of praying, right? This is what they do, but that's the story. But as Liz was saying here, it's a little bit unclear where the rest of these officials at the king's gate are as far as their own motivations. Are they with Bigthan and Teresh and Haman? Are they simply not wondering? Are they simply wondering why Mordecai won't bow? Do they kind of wish they had the same courage as Mordecai because they don't like Haman either? I mean, we really don't know what the motives of these other officials are in the situation, but they're certainly wondering why Mordecai is daring to defy Haman. Liz raises a good question. If not execution for all of the Jews, what would have the normal, non-irate punishment have been for Mordecai for not bowing down to Haman? And you made the comment, did anybody else really care? You get the idea that not many people liked Haman, except Haman and his close circle, which we'll meet here in a few minutes. I mean, this is the way it is, though. When you act like Haman acts, who wants to be around you? Really? Who wants to be around a guy like that? So it may well be the other officials like, why aren't you doing this? But maybe privately wishing they also didn't do it. I mean, we don't know. Right. So a lot of, they did make it known that, to Haman that he was doing this. But, are they active informers, or are they just kind of, we're going to see what happens to him? We don't know. Yes. Was there a hand trot or just a head scratch? Head scratch. Okay. All right. So let's see, a little bit of backdrop there. So we come back here at the end of chapter 5. Haman is angry, filled with rage. Filled with rage in Esther, we had King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, when Vashti wouldn't come in to be his little object of display before his drunken crowd. And then we had filled with rage Haman, when Mordecai initially would not bow or pay homage, and he was made aware of it. And now we have filled with rage again. Whenever someone is filled with rage in Esther, it doesn't go well. So rage is not our good motivator for acting, according to the book of Esther. And we can only imagine what Haman is going to do right now. But Haman restrained himself, 5:10. Oh, that Haman, showing such restraint. Didn't do anything right then. What a great guy, Haman. And he goes home and calls together his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman goes through his "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble" song, right? He boasts about his wealth and his sons and the king's honor and how he was his right-hand man above all the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, but wait, there's more. I'm the only person that Queen Esther invited to the private banquet with her and the king. It can't get any better than this, except I still haven't found what I'm looking for, or I can't get no satisfaction, or you can't always get what you want, or pick your song, right? As long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. And so he's got his goat. Mordecai is there sitting at the king's gate and not giving him honor. By the way, some have suggested the fact that Mordecai was back at the gate suggests that Mordecai had ended his period of fasting and mourning and was back in his normal clothing now. Remember, the king can't stand unhappiness in his presence. If you're sad and mourning, keep that outside of the palace grounds, if you would, and come in only when you can at least pretend to be happy. So we think that maybe Mordecai's official period of fasting ended while Esther was in having this banquet with Haman and the king. But at any rate, Haman is not happy, and he pours this out to his wife and his friends. And his wife's proposal is, in verse 14 of chapter 5, literally, have a gallows built, or have wood built, is the literal term. Have wood or have a tree erected, meaning probably an impaling pole. I promised you more exciting information on execution, capital punishment in the ancient Persian Empire, and here you go. The first thing you need to know is Google carefully with this subject. Google carefully with this subject. Yeah, just, that's right. Just be, if I start getting advertisements on the edge of my email for capital punishment devices, then I'll know that the cookies have tracked me, that sort of thing. Anyway, there may have been, so the dynasty of which Xerxes was a part lasted about 200 years, 300 years, give or take. And so they had lots of different ways of killing people. But it does seem that impaling was the capital choice, if you will. And impaling basically did for the Persians what crucifixion would later do for the Romans. It was reserved for the same kinds of crimes of state, treason, rebellion, these kind of things. And its intent was not just to kill you, but humiliate you. Hence the height here, and some of the scholars think this to be an exaggerated height. But again, in this empire, everything is over the top. But the height here would be heightening the shame, because the body impaled will be held up higher. And if you want to see grotesque illustrations of what the impaling would have looked like functionally, there were different strategies for doing this. All of the faces in the room say, Nathan, you have done enough research on that topic, and we are happy to leave it there. Anyway, his wife and his friends, but the emphasis is on his wife, say, have this pole erected in the morning, right? And then, have it erected, and then in the morning, ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Notice the order of operations here. When Haman was going to get the king to make the decree to eliminate the Jews without telling the king that it was the Jews whom he wanted eliminated, he first cast the Purim, the dice, if you will, to see what the date should be, and then he goes to the king for permission. Now the order is supposed to be set up this pole, this stake first, meaning tonight, and then in the morning go ask the king. Keeping in mind, you can't go to the king uninvited. I read that last night in one of the commentaries. Oh yeah, this is great. So he has to figure out a way to go to the king and ask for his will to be done, meaning I want to kill Mordecai on this stake, this pole that I've already set up. That's his wife's idea. What was the concern? What was the concern in chapter 1 when Vashti said no to the king? What was the concern that all the king's advisors had after Vashti rebelled against the wishes of the king? They wouldn't be able to control the women. The women are going to rise up and they're going to not respect their husbands. And so the whole point of deposing Vashti and telling the whole empire about it was to get all of the women to get into line and respect their husbands. Now in Esther chapter 5, it is the king himself saying, quickly, Haman, come, let's go do the word of Esther. And now at the end of chapter 5, it's Haman's wife who says, here's the plan, go and do it. So the women are, in fact, running things in chapter 5. But that's how it works anyway, says Jamie. So, we all knew this, right?
Let you think that it's your idea.
Right, let you think it's your idea. Right, that's right. That's right. And that's exactly what's happened here, So this is supposed to be funny. This book is supposed to make us laugh, and it is. And so you have these same power people that are so concerned about the women in chapter 1. Now in chapter 5, the women are running the show. And at least in Esther's case, it's good. And in Zeresh's case, it's bad. But the whole plan is, go have him hanged and then have a happy banquet. A happy meal, right? This is the original happy meal. You'll have a happy meal if you go out and kill your enemy. Because that's the only color missing in the Haman rainbow, is that Mordecai the Jew is still sitting there. Never mind the fact in a matter of months, Mordecai will be done with, right? Because he's part of this target audience that Haman has already gotten the decree to eliminate them. But I want him killed right now. I can't wait. I need instant gratification. And his wife solves the problem, build the execution device tonight, and go see the king in the morning, have Mordecai hanged, and then go to banquet number 2 as happy as you can possibly be. Yes, Jamie.
So when I think of things, when we talk about how big things are,
Right.
I always try to get something in my head.
Right.
75 feet. The high rise is 7 stories.
Right. And that's why the scholars have gone back and forth. We know at least that the author of Esther is having fun at different points telling the story. It's at least at the level of our based on a true story movie where there's some liberties taken to heighten some things. It literally heightens some things. And so there's some speculation that maybe this is over the top for him to throw together something that's 75 feet high, maybe 60 feet high, depending on your estimate. Cubit is kind of subjective. Whose arm are we going with here? Because a cubit is like your arm length, and but whose arm? I don't know. That create a problem. Wouldn't you got a short guy working on this end of the building, a tall guy on this end? Anyway, but I don't know how they standardize cubits, but apparently there's some variation in cubit from one part of the world to the other. We don't know, but the point is very, very high and able to be seen from a great distance so as to shame Mordecai for the high crime of not fearing and trembling in the presence of mighty Haman, whose life is otherwise perfect in every way, including his wife with such sound advice. The suggestion delights Haman. We've had a lot of delight going on so far in Esther. Did I write my delights down? You can go back and find, please, right here. The king is pleased at the end of chapter 1 with the plan to depose Vashti and send out the decree. The king is pleased in chapter 2 with the plan, spend the night with each of the virgins and pick one for your queen. And so now again, Haman is pleased, same terminology, to have this execution device built. And apparently he goes out right away and does it. I don't know what time of day that banquet happened, banquet number 1, but there was enough day left that he had this encounter with his wife and his friends, and he saw Mordecai on the way from the palace to the wife and friends, and now he is initiating the process of erecting this device to kill, to shame his enemy, and that's going to all be in motion here before chapter 6 gets going. Any other questions before we go into chapter 6? This is a great discussion today.
Not saying this would have been right either, but if just from the beginning, he had just wanted if he had just wanted Mordecai to be killed, we wouldn't be having a problem right now. Mordecai is the issue. He'd already killed Mordecai. He wouldn't have been able to see him sitting there. Because he has this plan where Mordecai's going to be everybody.
That's a great point. If Haman had just taken out his wrath on Mordecai to start with and knocked off Mordecai and that was the end of the story, he'd already been done with this. But the fact that he overreacted and cast the purr to come up with a dice that, unfortunately, from his perspective, is months down the road, now he's got to deal with this guy. He could have gotten rid of him right away, but it's like because he can't think small and simple and he has to think big and large, he actually makes things worse for himself, if you will. But it makes for a much better story. Much better story. So, anyway, any more questions about chapter 5? We get to chapter 6. Yes, Jamie.
Why nobody else seemed to be bothered that Mordecai was. It kind of reminds me too of, we have laws, speed limit's 55.
Right.
Nobody really says too much if they're doing
No.
5, 6, 7 miles.
Right.
all that.
Right.
But if something happens, or if somebody else is following the rules and sees you not following the rules, and that makes them mad. But for the most part, nobody really says anything because it's not bothering me.
Right. If you're breaking a law, so you use the speed limit, a few miles above the speed limit, nobody really cares about not doing a thing. And maybe that was Haman's thing too. Nobody's going to really care deeply that you're not bound down to Haman because we don't like him either. I mean, it could well be that kind of thing, right?
And there may have been
Right.
other people not bound down
Right.
there either.
Right.
They just didn't notice it.
Right. But the moment that you were going too fast and you ran over my cat, right, now all of a sudden it's an issue. And so Haman is definitely, that may well be a good parallel there, for sure. Yeah. Well, let's read what happens that night in the bedroom of the king. Are you intrigued? Chapter 6. Let's just go 1 and 2 right now, just for fun. Okay, Steve on the front row, chapter 6, verses 1 and 2.
That night the king had trouble sleeping, so he ordered an attendant to bring the book of the history of his reign, so it could be read to him. In those records he discovered an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the eunuchs who guarded the door to the king's private quarters. They had plotted to assassinate King Xerxes.
Okay, very good. Bigthana or Big. His name tends to appear 2 different ways. In chapter 1, I think it was just Bigthan, and then Bigthana and Bigthan. Probably the same guy. It's a variant of the same Persian name, I'm told. But one of the king's people who plotted against him. Anyway, the king can't sleep, and so he says, "Bring out the records of my own reign to be read to me." This is the cure for insomnia. This would be like if I can't sleep and I ask Liz to find a tape of one of my sermons to play for me. So maybe you already do that to fall asleep. If you do, don't admit it. But anyway, I can't sleep, so what I really need is records of my own reign. I'm supposed to approve the minutes of the meeting, so go ahead and read them, blah, blah, blah. And then it comes to his attention that Mordecai saved his life, chapter 2, and nothing was done for him. This is embarrassing for the king. Bigthan and Teresh were the 2 that had plotted against the king. Verses 3 and 4, how about that? Jeff has it, thank you.
And the king said, "My honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this." Then said the king's servant that ministered to him, "There is nothing done for him." And the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him.
All right, this is great right now. What was done? 2 words here. What honor and recognition, or perhaps promotion or dignity, has been given to Mordecai for this? And the answer is nothing. We know from the secular historians that Persian kings, among others, were really good to do favors for people who saved their lives because they were interested in staying alive. So if you tipped off the king to a plot on his life, you would get rewarded richly for this because you saved the king's life. And yet nothing was done. This is a black mark on the very dense Xerxes. Xerxes is not a perceptive individual here in this whole story. And so what's been done for him? Nothing. And so the king's question is, who is in my court? Remember, the king makes no decisions on his own. His wife defies him. Call in all the king's men. What do I do about this? I don't know. And then he's sad about Vashti. What do I do? And the advisors come in. And, he can't make a decision on his own. Haman has already duped him in at least a couple decisions here. And so, who's in the court? I need somebody to come in and help me and advise me what I should do here. And who happens to be in the court? Haman. Why is he there? He has finished building his gallows, his stake, his execution device, and he has come for the purpose of what? Yeah, asking the king for permission to murder Mordecai. So this is beautiful.
You've got to maneuver a way to get invited.
That's right, that's right. So Haman has no idea what the king has been doing all night, and the king has no idea what Haman has been doing all night. But we know good and well what both of them are doing all night, and they both are thinking about Mordecai. They're just thinking about him in very opposite directions. Now, again, as the scholar I was reading last night pointed out, we're assuming here the rules that apply to Esther being queen also would apply to Haman being second in command. You got to get invited to go in and see the king. So how fortuitous from Haman's perspective that I show up in the outer court and instantly the king needs an advisor. He's calling me in. Great. Things could not be going. My wife had a great idea last night. I've got this steak all set up, and now the king is calling me in. I didn't have to scheme my way in there. He's just going to call me in. This is great, Haman says. And so Haman is going to be called in to go and see the king and provide advice to the king. Now, this next part is really, really funny. So verses 5 through 10 of Esther 6. Liz wants this one. Esther chapter 6, verses 5 through 10.
So the attendants replied to the king, Haman is out in court. Bring him in, the king ordered. So Haman came in, and the king said, what should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me? Haman thought to himself, who would the king wish to honor more than me? So he replied, if the king wishes to honor someone, he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with a royal emblem on its head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let him see that the man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robes and led to the city square on the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go, this is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor.
Stop right there. We'll just stop at verse 9 right now. Okay, you get to read verse 10, but just hold on right there, okay? So Haman is in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered, just like the king said, bring him in when it was time for the banquet, right? Now, bring him in. And Haman comes in. The question is, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Notice back up in verse 3, when the king is having his records read to him as kind of a lullaby, and he finds out that Mordecai saved his life, what honor and recognition, perhaps also promotion, something to elevate him has been done for him? And the answer is nothing. Now the question is, what honor? What should be done for the man the king likes to honor? And the promotion thing is left out, which would actually fit better for Haman, who's already been promoted as high, theoretically, as he can be promoted, other than being king. So what should be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? That phrase, the man the king delights to honor, in Hebrew, shows up 6 times in our passage, 4 times in the lips of Haman himself. It's like he can't get enough to say the phrase, well, for the man the king delights to honor, the man the king delights to honor. He's assuming all the way through, it's me. Because of all the people and all the empire stretching from India to Egypt, what man could the king possibly desire to honor except for me, right? That's the thinking here. And he's got King Xerxes' disease. He exactly does. And that's a very good point, Jeff. We're supposed to see Haman as having the same character traits as Ahasuerus himself, Xerxes himself. He is obsessed with himself. So it's one of those things where he thinks it's a parable. You know, like when the prophet Nathan tells David the parable about the man with the sheep, and then it turns out to be, thou art the man. He thinks it's this kind of situation. He's telling me, he's being vague about this, but he really intends to do something nice for me. He's really saying, name your price, Haman. And so Haman's like, well, for the man the king delights to honor, bring a robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, and the horse is wearing a royal symbol on its head, which you might think is crazy, but actually there is some ancient artwork in Assyria of the horses having some kind of crown on their heads. One of the commentaries suggested that they did some kind of fancy braiding of the horse's mane or something, so even the horse is crowned. So I want to wear a robe that the king has worn, and ride a horse that the king has ridden, and have the horse itself wearing some kind of royal insignia or crown upon its head, and then let this person the king delights to honor be led by one of the king's most noble people, which is going to be really funny here, right? And have him say, the man the king delights to honor, the man the king delights. That's a great parade here, all the way through, right? That's what's supposed to happen. If we know that Haman is assuming these honors are going to come to himself, the question is, why would Haman want these honors, and what is being communicated by these kinds of honors. So a couple of background pieces here. Genesis 41. Genesis 41, right? Yeah, verse 39. Genesis 41, verse 39. The story of Joseph, as the story of Daniel, has a lot of affinity with the story of Esther. Remember that Joseph has given Pharaoh the very wise counsel, having interpreted his dream, and said, you're going to have some years of plenty and some years of famine, so you want to store up during the years of plenty to have leftovers for the years of famine, and you need someone wise to be in charge of this. And so Pharaoh decides to choose Joseph himself. So I think I said Daniel, I meant Joseph all that. So Genesis 41, 39 through 43. Steve on the second row, please. Yes, Genesis 41, 39 to 43.
Then Joseph said, or since Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You should be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders, and only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger, and he dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and the men shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of.
Okay, so Joseph has interpreted Pharaoh's dream, has given him the advice of what to do to prepare for these years of famine. And Pharaoh says to Joseph, obviously God has given you wisdom. You're the guy, you're in charge. And in verse 42 there of Genesis 41, he took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. Well, Haman already has the signet ring because Haman has already been signing documents on behalf of the king. He already got that earlier. And he dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck and had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and men shouted before him, make way. What Haman is doing in some respects is a step up from Joseph's type of thing. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 1. And I think I want verses 32 through 35. 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 32 35. You want that, Todd? Thank you.
King David said, summon to me the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and
Benaiah.
Benaiah, there we go, son of somebody.
Jehoiada, yeah, there you go.
When they came before the king said, then take you servants of your lord and have my son Solomon ride on my own mule and bring me down to Gihon. There let the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anoint him king over Israel, then blow the trumpet and say, long live King Saul.
Okay, there you go. So this is a transition ceremony. Solomon will be king after I am king, says David. So he's going to ride on my own animal, and he's going to be anointed by the priest, and the trumpet's going to be blown, and they're going to shout, long live King Solomon. So what Haman is asking for is in the lines of the recognition of Joseph as second in command, except Haman is already second in command, and so it actually has more echoes here with this basically future king anointing of King Solomon here. And so basically Haman is asking for kingly dignity. I want to wear the king's robe and sit on the king's horse and effectively be announced as a successor to the king. That may be what he's asking for here. Nothing less than, oh my goodness, is what Haman is asking for the man the king delights to honor. Questions, comments, observations about that? Well, maybe, but the thing is, Xerxes isn't picking up on the fact that Haman is assuming that Xerxes is talking about Haman. And so Xerxes doesn't realize how self-centered Haman is being, probably because Xerxes himself is pretty self-centered. I mean, that tends to be the way that it is. And so it is, he's just talking in terms of the man the king delights to honor. And Haman is enthusiastically going along with it because he assumes that he is the direct object of this honor, but actually he is not. It's going to be somebody else. And this is verse 10, Liz, which is your reading of chapter 6 of Esther.
Excellent, the king said to Haman. Quick, take the robes and my horse, and do just as you have said for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the
Yeah, leave out no detail you've suggested. Do it every I, every T, do it down to the nth degree. I want you to do what you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew. Notice how he throws that in again. So apparently, the king knows Mordecai is Jewish, and the king doesn't realize that the group that Haman was talking about when he gave him a signet ring to make this issue is actually the Jews. So the king has still not put that together yet either. So the king is a forgetful king, an ignorant king, not really checking with it. So he says, go get Mordecai the Jew, and you do for him everything that I have just commanded you.
Haman's face.
Oh my goodness, Haman's face. I mean, think about how swimmingly everything was going for Haman. His wife had the great idea, kill him before breakfast, then you'll have a fun time at lunch. And then he gets to the king early in the morning. He's probably thinking, how am I going to get in there? And the king wants an advisor to come in and help him with the problem. So great, I get to go in and talk to him. And the man the king delights to honor. Well, who could he be talking about with me? He's already honored me to be his right hand man. And so Haman says, well, here's what you should do. You should treat this man as though he's the next king. Treat him as royalty and have it announced by a member. That's the thing. This is where he gets himself, right? I want one of the nobles to go around and announce that the man the king delights to honor, is the man the king delights to honor. And what more available noble is there now than Haman himself? So Haman has cooked his own proverbial goose here, and he is eating his humble pie. And if we thought it was bad in the middle of chapter 5, when Haman walks out in high spirits from Esther's banquet and sees Mordecai, doggone it, my life is perfect except for that guy. Now, the king says, you take that guy, and you take him all over town, and you announce loudly, behold the man the king delights to honor. Behold the man the king. I mean, this is great fun.
Express like his highest desire in his life. Like there's nothing he wants more than this, and now he has to do it.
That's right. He has just revealed his heart, all of his hopes and all of his dreams, and now they're crushed because they all go to the one man in the whole empire that he can't stand, and he has to go and honor him. Verses 11 through 14. Who would like that? Verses 11 through 14. All right, Jamie, thank you.
So Haman took the robes and put them on Mordecai, placed him on the king's own horse, and led him through the city square shouting, "This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor." Afterward, Mordecai returned to the palace gate, but Haman hurried home, dejected and completely humiliated. And when Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends what had happened, his wise advisors and his wife said, "Since Mordecai, this man who has humiliated you, is of Jewish birth, you will never succeed in your plans against him. It will be fatal to continue opposing him." While they were still talking, the king's eunuchs arrived and quickly took Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared.
Oh my goodness. So he's poor Haman, right? So Haman gets the robe, he gets the horse, he gets Mordecai, he puts him on the horse, he leads him around the city. The man the king delights to honor all around the city. And afterward, Mordecai goes back to work as usual. He doesn't become something fancy, no promotion. He just got a big thank you from the king, the man the king delights to honor. And now he's back at work at the king's gate doing whatever it was he was doing before. But Haman is in mourning. His head is covered in grief. So public mourning for Mordecai, for Esther, for her people, that happens when they find out a genocide has been decreed. Public mourning for Haman happens when he had to humble himself and honor his enemy. So what brings you to mourning? Well, in Mordecai's case, it's the horrible news that my people are going to be annihilated. In Haman's case, it's I have been personally shamed. And he covers his head as a sign of mourning, and he rushes home, and he tells his sad story. How was your day at school, hon? And tells his sad story to his wife and his friends, the same wife and friends who had given them the brilliant plan just one night before. And now they're having to console him, except they're not that consoling, since Mordecai is a Jew, of Jewish seed, literally. Remember the promise to Abraham, through your seed, your offspring, all the nations are going to be blessed. Since Mordecai is of Jewish seed, surely you can't stand against him. It's as if they just put this together or figure this piece of information out. But we have several places in Scripture where you have these Gentile voices acknowledging in some extent that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is with the people of Israel, and therefore they're going to prevail. We don't have time right now since it is 10 o'clock, but we can look at this again. But a few weeks ago, we talked about the history of Israel and the Amalekites, and we find Balaam pronouncing an oracle where basically Israel is going to succeed and the Amalekites are going to fail. My favorite, though, example of this is back in Joshua chapter 2. I'll read this in the interest of time. Joshua chapter 2, verses 8 through 11. This is Rahab. Remember, she is the prostitute who is going to be used by the people of Israel as spies to help them get Jericho. Before the spies lay down for the night, this is Joshua 2, verse 8, Rahab went on the roof and said to them, I know the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, who you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. And then she asked them for favor, for kindness. So you have many places. In Daniel, a couple different times, the kings acknowledge, when the Lord delivers Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, when the Lord delivers Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the King of kings, the Lord of lords. And so there's this acknowledgement from Gentiles that because he is who he is, you can't stand against him. So once again, without the name of the Lord being actually spoken in the book of Esther, you have Zeresh and the friends of Haman saying, if this guy is of Jewish origin, if he's of the seed of Abraham, you're not going to be able to stand against him. And so you're in trouble. And this is evidence that you're in trouble and you're not going to make it. And so his closest advisors and his wife, who were so encouraging in his despair at the end of chapter 5, have said, we think this is evidence that you're in trouble. And while he gets this news, quickly, just like chapter 5, quickly get Haman that the word of Esther may be done. We'll go to banquet number 1. Now it's quickly get Haman and take him off to banquet number 2, which is supposed to be his happy meal after he eliminates his enemy, and now he is brought lower than low, and his countenance entering into banquet number 2 is going to be much lower than it was at banquet number 1. And we can get the foreshadowing here of what's going to happen. This will turn out to be his last meal, if you will. And and we already know the king's coming has already implicitly been framed as agreeing to give Esther her request. Any other comments or questions or impressions about chapter 6 today?
He still doesn't know what Esther's request would be. He just has all this stuff in his head from like how horrible all this stuff went.
Right.
He knows what to do about it. So
Right.
he doesn't totally understand.
No. He's not in a good frame of mind. Have you ever gone into a meeting with not a good frame of mind? So he's going in, I know I have, he definitely is going in with less than the best frame of mind. He still thinks Esther likes him because she invited him to banquet number 1. And at least the higher-ups in the palace don't know of the connection between Esther and Mordecai. We get the idea that some of the lower people in the palace know because they've been running messages back and forth. But we don't know that about Haman doesn't know that yet about Esther and Mordecai. So he's not yet suspicious of that, but he has been told the writing is on the wall, pal. This thing that has happened here, the fact that this thing got reversed so dramatically for you is evidence that things are not good and things are going to get bad. So banquet number 2, we had this interlude, so we have another sandwich, right? Like we have in the Gospel of Mark. You have banquet number 1, you got banquet number 2, and in the middle we had this great turning of fortunes where we thought it was the last straw for Mordecai, and now it becomes Haman's doom has been pronounced. And now let's have the second banquet and see how things have changed. That's where we are in the story. So we will not meet next week. I will not be here. We will meet again in 2 weeks. So that would be the 24th of September. We will pick up in Esther chapter 7. Let's pray together before we dismiss. Lord, thank you for this story today. Thank you for the fun, the laughter of this. I pray that your Spirit would search out our hearts, though, that we would not be like Haman anyway, that in our laughing at Haman we would see ourselves, and that you would cleanse us and cause us to be humble and view ourselves and others rightly, and to act and speak rightly and fairly about others around us. And we thank you for your grace to us in that way. Make us look more like Jesus, we pray, and help us, Jesus, to be faithful to you in this day, and we pray in your precious name. Amen. Okay, I am going to say goodbye to the online crowd, and we will see you again for this in 2 weeks.